Welcome back to Season 1, Episode 35. This is the season finale of the first season of Caniac Chronicles. And on top of that, the Hurricanes, Stanley Cup Champions. How about it? 20 years, almost to the date. I think it was 4 or 5 days off from being to the date. We got a lot to talk about, a lot to kind of go over. I want to do with this episode, it'll be definitely a longer one than usual. I want to go through, we'll do a quick glimpse across this playoff journey for the last couple of months. We'll do some look backs. I want to do a top five, favorite moments. And we'll talk about the finals. We'll digest that from start to finish, and then just some conversation around the journey up until this point before we close out before the end of the season. I'll take a couple weeks off. I'll probably come back with season 2, episode 1, right around the free agency mark, and then unlike last year, I think I'm probably gonna take some time off during the summer. I've got some things I want to work on in the background, some stuff I want to put together. I'll be probably turning this episode into a bunch of clips that I'll be posting throughout the summer to kind of keep, the socials going. But do have a lot of stuff that I want to work on for this summer in anticipation of the next season. So without further ado, let's jump into it. What a time. What a series. It was those first 4 games, they were thrilling. Going into the series, I sort of had my doubts, to be honest. Vegas was really catching fire. They were just, a lot of the commentators were saying it. They were getting better and better each playoff, between each playoff series, but then as each playoff series went on as well, like within the series itself, they would just keep getting better and better. And they closed out Colorado, in those 4 games there, sweeping them out of the Western Conference Finals. Again, it's one of those things I've talked about a lot this season. Looking back on it in hindsight, it's something that we can sort of, I guess, have more palpability on. Colorado was obviously pretty beaten up by that point in the postseason. To be honest, that was why, in my opinion, they made it past the Minnesota series. I actually picked Minnesota beating Colorado. To be fully transparent, in the bracket that I submitted for our group, the group chat to see who could get the most points, I actually had Minnesota beating Carolina in the finals. I thought Minnesota was a very good, very well-rounded team. Their players, their lines were doing really well. They have a guy that, I would love to have on Carolina, not anymore at the price that he commands, although, before that contract that he signed during the season this year, making him the highest paid player in the league, I thought Kirill Kaprizov would have been a fantastic addition to the Carolina Hurricanes. And I would have loved to have seen Carolina and Eric Tulsky make a move to try and get him. Obviously, that didn't happen. I think Bill Guerin is their GM's name, and he got the job done before any teams could really talk to him. Which kudos to him. Kirill is a very phenomenal player. He's a guy that I believe will end up with a cup one day. Although Spittin' Chicklets, I believe, posted it this week after Carolina won. Now that Carolina has won the Stanley Cup, the trend continues. I don't think a single team with a player being paid over 10 million AAV, or average value, and average annual value contract, being paid over $10 million has ever won the Stanley Cup. And Kirill is, certainly beyond that number at this point. I forget what he signed for, but I believe it was the upward teens, 16 to 18 million a year. So who knows, maybe that trend will continue, and he'll need to wait until after he's, gotten off that long-term big pay deal and either go to a new team or take a much more cap-friendly contract with the Minnesota Wild to get the cup that everybody wants, obviously. But I feel the cup that he deserves as a player. Maybe that will have to happen for them, but they played a very physical. It was probably the most physically demanding series I felt in the playoffs, and I think both teams came out of it very beat up. Minnesota, I attribute the losing of the series to the physical toll that they took. I think it hurt them more than it hurt Colorado. But as we saw with Colorado moving on into the Western Conference Finals, just completely getting manhandled. I wanted to say owned, but they were just completely dominated by Vegas in that Western Conference. And, you could really say, I'll say it, Vegas was not the expected team to be in the Stanley Cup Finals versus the Canes. Obviously, I think everybody anticipated Colorado being that team. A lot of people, and rightfully so, probably felt that Dallas could have been the team that showed up. Really, any of those top three teams from the Central Division, Minnesota, Colorado, and Dallas, because the Pacific Division was just, throughout the regular season, was just pathetic, to say the least. Vegas made the playoff. They won the division, having less wins than both of the teams beneath them, as well as less wins than losses on the year. They were below 500 if you take away the loser point exception kind of thing. Loser point merchants is what we were calling them. So yeah, it was just, it was I don't want to say it was an easy path, because I don't really think any path to the Stanley Cup Finals is all that easy, no matter who you are. At the end of the day, you have to beat 4 NHL caliber teams, NHL caliber rosters in a 7-game series to win the Stanley Cup. That's not easy by any means, no matter who you play, no matter what the circumstances are, in my opinion. But it was definitely a less than ultra challenging, if I could phrase it like that. It was definitely a smoother run, a smoother path to the finals for Vegas than we probably would have expected to have seen. Because either way, they've got to face one of those top 3 teams from the Central Division, no matter who it is, Colorado, Dallas, Minnesota. That should have been a very difficult series for them. But like I said, they kind of beat up pretty heavily on each other, and Vegas got the benefit of that once they reached the finals. They also had the benefit of facing Utah and Anaheim in the first 2 rounds, and while I do think Anaheim is on the up, it's Utah's very first playoff appearance as a franchise, and it's Anaheim, a very young team, in their first playoff appearance in quite some time, since I believe it was 2017 was their last appearance in the playoffs. And outside of Trouba and Carlson on that team, the vast majority of that Anaheim team is just very inexperienced with the playoffs as a whole. I wouldn't even say on an individual level, but as a whole. And Quenneville came back. It was Quenneville's first year with the team. There was just a lot of extenuating circumstances there. And Vegas, walks through all the doors that are left cracked open. And kudos to them. Again, it's not easy to make your way all the way to the finals, no matter what side you're on. We as Canes fans can very much attest to that, right? But anyways, we move into the Stanley Cup Finals. Carolina has swept the Ottawa Senators. They have swept the Philadelphia Flyers. If they didn't have all those games, all those days off between the second and third round, they might have even made it into the Cup into the Cup Finals with a perfect record. Who knows? But they're coming in hot, 12-1. The HSB line. I mean, you can't say enough about that line. Before I forget, what I've been saying to myself all week and really leading up to the Conn Smythe announcement was that Hall, Stankoven, Blake line could have won the Conn Smythe on an individual level, any one of them, but even on the entire line, you could have given that entire line the Conn Smythe. They were just playing unbelievably together, unbelievable hockey from the three of them, and it was awesome to watch. The whole show was special to watch, but specifically those three, led by Taylor Hall, the 2010 number one overall pick, didn't have the career that didn't have the. Obviously, he came in. He was one of those very first, very heavily hyped number one overall picks coming into the league, picked by Edmonton. He's the first one out of that group from Edmonton. And, I think the league and the fans, had a lot of expectations. They maybe not expectations, but certainly high hopes for the guy. I think by now, if we rewind the clock to 2010, the summer of 2010, I think if you asked a lot of people, would Taylor Hall have a Cup championship by, in the next 10 years, let's say, I think you'd probably get a pretty resounding yes. But it took, it ended up taking the full 16 years almost for him to put it all together. And you could really see that in his play this postseason. The Spit and Chicklets made a lot of good points that when, before he exited Chicago, he was going through it, not just on a personal level, but with the franchise he was playing with. He was getting healthy scratched in Chicago. I mean, Taylor Hall getting healthy scratched in Chicago, and it was really making him doubt himself. He was sort of wondering, is my time to hang up the skates upon us? Almost like, what's in it for me? What's left for me? I'm not really contributing to anything around here. But that infamous Mikko Rantanen trade happens. Natchez and Drury end up in Colorado, and Mikko Rantanen gives, what was his name? Roslovic, right? I think it was Roslovic. I think it was. He takes Roslovic's number, gives him a nice little Rolex and probably a little cash bonus for doing that for him, plays 13 games with Carolina and gets sent right back out. But in that initial trade, we also scoop up Taylor Hall from Chicago, while I think Chicago retains some of the salary hit from Rantanen. And they get a draft pick back from us as well. So Taylor Hall comes over in that trade. We end up shipping, Rantanen right back out a little while later, and we pick up Hall's new line mate, Logan Stankoven. And Jackson Blake obviously came up through the prospect channels for Carolina. And those three put together an unbelievable Stanley Cup run. They carried the weight. They carried the burden. Let's be honest here. Let me pull up the stats really quick. I do have them handy. Jackson Blake led the team in points this postseason with 20 points across 19 games. So we had a good amount. We had four guys running at about, if you include Stankoven, who's only 3 points shy of a point per game, we had about four guys playing at a point per game pace. And the three of them from the HSB line, Jackson Blake, Logan Stankoven, and Taylor Hall, all leading the pack with 20 points for Jackson Blake. That's the most on the team. You get 19 from Hall, and you get 16 from Logan Stankoven. Blake and Hall both have 7 goals, while Stankoven has 11. And Stankoven had some that line as a whole did, but Stankoven had some massive goals, right? He had that goal in game 2 against Vegas that really got the team going. It was the first goal of the game. he was like we've heard, he was a junkyard dog, and he was pestering. I forget who it was, but one of the might have been McNabb, but he was pestering one of the big defensemen for Vegas behind his own net, and he ends up getting the puck turned over, and just comes right around the front of the net and makes that big wraparound to chance convert, and that was huge. That got the comeback going. He had a number of he had a lot of big goals across the playoffs. Logan Stankoven had a huge Stanley Cup Finals, playoffs rather, but finals as well. And like I was kind of trying to get to it was so awesome for Taylor Hall, the 2010 first overall pick, to have this run with these two young guys at his side. That line was just so good, so good. Taylor Hall playing like he was like his 2011, like it's the 2011 Stanley Cup playoffs, and not just that, but playing like there's no tomorrow kind of thing. I think the whole team was really playing like that this postseason, but that line especially, and they did a lot of the heavy lifting for us. It was huge, especially when you consider the fact that Aho and Svechnikov and even Jarvis were having the struggles that they had. Although they did end up with 12, 11, and 11 points respectively by the end of it, which is not terrible by any means. But the goal production just was not there from the three of them as much as we would have liked it to have been. But they came up big, obviously. And Taylor Hall, before I move on from that line, I kind of want to just talk about everybody and all the storylines throughout this episode. Taylor Hall got to be the number one guy I'm so happy for that was able to win the cup. I'm so proud that it was the Carolina Hurricanes franchise that could get him his Stanley Cup championship. It's not quite on the same level as Ray Bourque, but it's special when a team can win with a guy like Ray Bourque on their team who's been with one team his entire career, or just all these other teams who have never been able to make the full run, the full lunar eclipse per se, happen for that guy. And Taylor Hall was one of those players. He's one of those guys that was the final notch, I think, in his NHL resume, to solidify him as one of the greats, and ultimately living up to the hype, all that hype from back in 2010, that surrounded him coming into this league, and with this, as high of a draft pick as he was. That was just so awesome. That's gotta be my personal number one storyline for this championship run. It was a blast watching Hall regain that confidence, regain his love and passion for the game of hockey, and not just that, but find all that success as well, because he had a lot of big goals as well for this run, starting with the first goal, the game-winning goal of Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Finals. It was just awesome. I'm so happy for Taylor Hall. I really am. Moving on, I guess we will talk about and big props as well. Let me just say this as well. Big props for Blake and Stankoven. I was talking about it a lot leading into this postseason about how I felt that we really needed to break that line up, to spread some right-handed shots around and get the size distributed across the other lines as well. But I mean, those two guys, Blake and Stankoven, they completely shut me up about that take. That had to have been one of my worst takes this season, because not just the success of that line, but the toughness of that line. Those two players, even though they're undersized relative to the league, man, you wouldn't know it if you watched the game, if you watched the minutes that they put in each game. They were all over the puck. They were all over players. They were taking hits. They were giving them. They never backed down, even when they took some nasty ones and were on the ice for a bit of a stretch or a bit of time. it didn't matter. They made it work. They put pucks in net, and they got the job done. And it's special for them, special for Stan Coven. His first 3 seasons as an NHL player: Western Conference Finals appearance, Eastern Conference Finals appearance, Stanley Cup champion. I mean, what a run to start an NHL career. And then Jackson Blake, coming from the pedigree of Jason Blake, North Dakota boy, always a North Dakota jersey on for Blake in the stands. There happened to be one on the glass the night of the championship, and he took notice of it. That was cool. And so it's good to see an American like him coming up through the collegiate system, getting a Stanley Cup of his own. And he fought. He was like Jarvis. He fought to be on this roster. He earned it. I don't know if anybody saw it, but there was that famous video of him and his dad being there for when they announced that they were going to sign him to an NHL contract and take him off of the AHL roster. So a lot of good storylines. Let's keep it rolling. Nick Ehlers, that's another big one, another veteran. Nick Ehlers, and he had a great interview about it too, standing there with all the media that came on the ice after the victory. But Ehlers put some time in with Winnipeg. I think it was 10 years, he said, 10 seasons. He was obviously one of their best players. He was always one of the guys that showed up on the score sheet for Winnipeg. And they had a number of really, really good rosters put together and really good playoff runs. I believe they made the Western Conference Finals once, maybe twice, but I definitely think they made it at least once. And they just, similar to the Hurricanes, they just could not get over that hump. It just goes to show you how difficult of a championship this thing is to execute on. But it was tough for Ehlers. He felt for his buddies back in Winnipeg. You could tell in that interview, it really hit home for him. It was obviously it's the number one goal anywhere you're at, but he was kind of like the Sebastian Aho of Winnipeg, and he had to make a tough decision. He had to leave the program and take his talents elsewhere to try and get this thing done. And fortunately for him, he took him to the right place. And he's the guy, it's his first year with Carolina, and I'll touch on it. I don't necessarily think I'll be talking about it a lot because I did hammer this point all throughout the regular season. But he's a good person to kind of just bring this topic back up, which is, this is his first year of his contract with Carolina. And Carolina, the contract situation right now is unbelievable. If my memory serves me, Anderson and Delorier are the only two free agents we have on the table this year. Everybody else is pretty much locked down for 3, 4, 5, or 6 years. Some people even more than that. And there's still about $12 million in cap space for Eric Tulsky to play around with. It's just truly incredible. It's an amazing situation that Tulsky has put this team in. And kudos to Tulsky too while we're at it. His storyline has been amazing as well. His resume is that he's, a chemist or a physicist he's a nerd. I'll cut to the chase. I'll stop beating around the bush. He's a nerd. And he became an NHL GM, and not just that, but now he's a championship NHL GM. He took a lot of flack for that Mikko Rantanen fiasco last season, and yeah, last year it didn't pan out, but look how well that trade, that whole scenario from the January to the trade deadline, look how well that trade has aged for Carolina. Marty Necas gets swept out of the playoffs again, this time in the Western Conference Finals instead of the East. And, Mikko Rantanen doesn't even make it past the first round. So, mic drop for Tulsky. Great run for him. I can foresee this being a pretty long run with Tulsky as the GM if he keeps up this. He's very analytically based. He looks at the analytics a lot, and kudos to him. It's paid off, and he's worked some amazing deals for this team. There's a lot of money to be played with on this roster. We'll see what happens this offseason. I don't think you can do you can't do nothing with it. And he's the type who's always looking to get better. So I fully expect that money to be utilized this year. But it was really special that, to me, it was really special that we were not just able to win the cup, obviously, but when you look at a lot of the last championships with Florida, with Vegas, with Tampa, we see that whole cap loophole being abused and teams being well over the cap that won championships. And now it's like, hey, Carolina did it well under the salary cap. So what can you say about that? Nothing really. So again, huge kudos to Tulsky. Fantastic storyline there as well. It's not just the players. The front office has their own storylines as well, and Tulsky's is the first that I'll talk about. But yeah, just going back to the point, Nick Ehlers just huge, right up there with Taylor Hall. Nick Ehlers didn't quite have the hype there, as I would say, as much as Taylor Hall did, but so excited for him, so excited that the Hurricanes could be the franchise that brought him the Stanley Cup, and he played a big role in it too. He had a fantastic Stanley Cup playoffs, 18 points, 8 goals, 18 games played. He did have those 2 delay a game penalties in the one game in the finals, and that accounted for 66% of all the penalties he took this postseason. But he got past it. Made a lot of really good plays. His skating ability, his stick handling, it brought an element to Carolina that just has not been there in the past. Not with the level of command that Nick Ehlers has over it. And so, so happy for him and all the Danes out there, him and Freddie Anderson, get to bring the cup back to Denmark this offseason. That'll be special for Denmark. Without further ado, the Conn Smythe winner himself, Jordan Staal, man. You want to talk about storylines? This player is the epitome of the storyline this postseason. From being, the longest amount of days, beating the record held by his brother Eric for the most days between, goals in the Stanley Cup Finals, beating him by 4 days there, from 2009 to 2026. To being the oldest player to win the Conn Smythe, to being the first player to score in his first 5 games of the finals. And on top of all of that, he's the guy who has been through the dog years of Carolina hockey, right? He came in 14 years ago. He came in, we had Jeff Skinner, we had Justin Falk, and that was about it from those days. And he made it through all that. He's stuck around with this team. He's stuck around through the dark years. He was not the captain until Justin Williams, I believe, left after his second go-around with the team. So there wasn't really a whole lot keeping him here until Rod came around. And he stayed through it. He stuck with it. So entertaining to watch Jordan Staal this postseason, especially in the Cup Finals. He was the catalyst that broke Vegas, I think, ultimately. Tortorella said it himself that they just had no answer for Jordan Staal. His presence, from his presence in front of the net to his presence in the face-off circle to his ability to just make goals happen this finals and find the back of the net, to his leadership, his commitment to the team, just every aspect of him, he embodied, I think, what the Conn Smythe is, which is being that guy, that difference maker, that game changer, but not just that, being that leader across the board too. I was ecstatic that Jordan Stahl got the Conn Smythe. I was hoping, as Bettman was speaking about it, I was really hoping it wasn't going to go to Mitch Marner on Vegas or Carter. I don't even think he could have said Carter Hart, but maybe Pavel Dorofeyev. He had a really good postseason. He showed up on the score sheet a lot. I think he had a hat trick in one of his series as well. But other than that, I really felt like it should have gone to someone on Carolina. They really slammed the door on Vegas in the final two games, and especially Mitch Marner. They kept Mitch Marner quiet in games 5 and 6, and that took everything away from Vegas. And so I was happy. I was hoping it was going to be either Jordan Stahl or Taylor Hall. I felt either one of those guys could have gotten it. Blake, I think you could have even given it to Blake, but with the performance that the two veterans were having, I sort of think that veteranship kind of adds a little bit of weight to the performance relative to Blake's. And so I am glad that it went to Stahl, and if it didn't go to him, I was hoping it went to Taylor Hall. So, and then that embrace, from his brothers there. He gave his dad a hug, he gave his mom a hug, and then Eric comes in from the side, and it was especially exciting to watch for me because I have brothers. And, that feeling if you have brothers, if, they show up there on the sides and everybody's excited and it just turns into this, enormous amount of chaos and screaming. And it's just the pure energy that radiates off that brothership. And they were so happy for him. He now leads the Stahl brothers in Stanley Cup rings. Mark and Jared, unfortunately, don't have any, and Eric only has the one from 2006, while Jordan now has the 2009 and 2026 Stanley Cup rings. So kudos to him. I don't know, and then one last thing about Jordan Stahl, I was sort of speculating it could be his last season. He could hang up the skates. I don't know. I don't really know how I feel about that anymore. We'll see how this offseason plays out. I could see him coming back because let's be honest, it's a very fair chance that we see this team in the finals again next year. And I know it's way too early to talk about this, but I think they're good enough. I think the vast majority of this roster will be back next season. I think we very easily could see back-to-back championships here. It's not out of the question. Florida did it just last year. Tampa had done it in seasons, recent seasons past. I very much think that Carolina could repeat here, and why wouldn't you want to come back if you're Jordan Stahl, if you believe that? Because he's still good enough. Quite clearly, he's still good enough. But great playoff for Jordan Stahl. Conn Smythe winner, Stanley Cup champion, 2-time Stanley Cup champion. No better guy to be the captain of this team that wins the Stanley Cup for the second time. No better guy. And while we're on him, they kind of go hand in hand. The Rod Brind'Amour storyline, obviously, it's a lot more clean cut. He was the captain in 2006 when they won. 20 years later, he's now the coach. Just a huge, huge Stanley Cup for him as well because, he's been the coach these last eight seasons. Up until this year, he's gone through the hurt, he's gone through the loss, the heartbreak, just like the players have. And he wants it so badly for those guys, not for himself. He wants it so badly for the players, for Aho, for Stahl. And he got it. He got it for them. And what a Stanley Cup hoist. I mean, Kochekov is the last player to get it. Kochekov hands it to Brind'Amour, and Brind'Amour does the little toss-up and hug. I mean, that's one of the all-time coaching cup receives on the ice in my lifetime, at least. That made me laugh so hard. Happy for Brind'Amour. Again, just like Jordan Stahl, wouldn't want any other coach in Carolina getting the cup back after the 2006 run while he was a captain. I'm so glad. I'm so happy for him, just like I am for the players. And then it's the trifecta. Sebastian Aho, the other storyline, just like Rod, just like Jordan, committed to this team. Unlike Jordan, he did come in and started having relative success on this team as a team. He's been through all these heartbreaks. He's put a lot of the fault on his own shoulders. But recently, Aho committed to this team. It was just a year and a half ago or so, I want to say, that he posted, or maybe 2 years ago, back in 2024. But there was a heartbreaker recently, and during the off season, he crafted a letter to the fans, basically saying, "Look, job's not done. I'm committed to Raleigh. I'm committed to the Carolina Hurricanes." He re-emphasized his belief. To be quite honest, I read it and I didn't add too much weight to it, just because it was so recently after whatever the heartbreak was that we had just went through. That I kind of just put it in the back of my mind and said, I probably just felt so bad and toxic that I said to myself, like, we're never going to win one kind of thing. But shortly, within a year or two after releasing that statement, Aho wins the cup with Carolina. And such a special thing. It makes me think, across the lines in like basketball with Jason Tatum. I'm trying to think of some other, situations like this, but they're few and far between, because it's 8 years. He could have gone to a new team a couple of different times. Remember, he was offer sheeted by Montreal. I mean, because he was offer sheeted by Montreal, and our GM at the time was probably a little petty, Kokaniemi's a Stanley Cup champion now too. Aho could have easily been in a different jersey this season, and it's just so special that the cup came to Carolina with him still on the roster. I'm so glad he was rewarded for those statements that he made, and for staying with the team. I'm so glad that he was rewarded, and not just that, but he was also rewarded when all the pressure was on, when the cup finals were coming down to a close, the playoffs as a whole were coming down to an end. He had not seen much success, right? He got those 2 empty netters against Philly. I think he had a shorthanded goal against Philly, it might have been a shorthanded goal against Ottawa, and a playoff goal against Philly, that's right, on the road. In, I believe it was game 4, maybe. I meant to look that up, because foreshadow, that's going to be one of my top 5 moments of the Stanley Cup finals, or the Stanley Cup playoffs for this team. But a big goal for Sebastian Aho in game 5, I believe. I believe it was game 5. Let me just validate that real quick. Game 5. So we've got... Aho scored the 3rd goal in Game 5, putting us up 3-1 at the time. Fantastic pass from Sean Walker, by the way, if you've been listening. I know I was calling him Scott Walker. I'm still stuck on the 2009 series against Boston there, saying Scott Walker, but Sean Walker making a fantastic pass to Aho on the far side, and he made that nice touch. That was the game I was at. I should have known that was the one. But a big goal for Sebastian Aho there. Svechnikov woke up that day too, so that was the game where, that top line that has been so quiet, and we've all been putting up wanted, missing person posters and milk ads for, finally show up, and it gives us the game because of the 2 of them. So just Awesome. Just so happy for Sebastian. He's now in Stanley Cup history. He's got eternal hockey glory now, and no better personality, in my opinion, and committed player to Carolina than Sebastian Aho. He's been with us through these playoff runs. He pretty much came up through these playoff runs. A second round 2015 draft, I think we all know if that was redone, Boston would have likely selected him in one of their 3 first-round picks, but they didn't, and Sebastian makes his way to Carolina, and Sebastian Aho is a Stanley Cup champion with the Carolina Hurricanes. Gosh, it feels good to say. Moving down the line, I think kind of going hand in hand with him is Svechnikov and Jarvis. Jarvis obviously having the big letdown in the middle of the season with the Olympics. Winning the silver medal, obviously, he still medals. It's still an award, but it's a tough one to get because you are a losing team when you get the silver medal in a team sport like that, when you go head-to-head. And it's huge. He's a Canadian boy. Obviously, he has all those buddies that have the social media account that follow him around, that lift him up. And it meant a lot to him, too, because he has been grinding. He grinded to get on this team, like I mentioned when I was talking about Blake. He was coming. I remember him coming in and getting the first glimpse of this Seth Jarvis guy. And at the time, he's improved. The puberty has done a little bit of wonders to him, but I remember him coming in, and if you're listening, Seth, no offense, but I was like, man, who is this ugly dude? But Seth Jarvis, he earned his spot on this team. He fought tooth and nail to get here and stay and earn himself an NHL contract, and they gave it to him, and he's been fighting ever since to boost this team, to give this team as much as he can. He had a more quiet year than he has in the past, and not just on the score sheet, but one thing I noticed was, he wasn't going in on heavy hits as often. He wasn't, he just wasn't in that toe-to-toe as much as he has been in the past, and I don't blame him. He's been beaten up over the course of the last few years. Even this year, was it this year that he took that bad play with Florida and it knocked him out for like a couple weeks? I think it was. Because he was on really good pace this season for potentially getting, 50 goals. But that injury with Florida going into the post, crashing into the post, I think really set him back. And, obviously he didn't make that mark. In fact, he ended with 32 goals this season. So, yeah, tough for him. And Aho, Aho led the team this season. I do want to just go through these top 10 quick. Aho with 80 points, 27 goals this regular season. Ehlers with 71 points. I think that's a career high, 21 goals. Svechnikov, 70 points, 31 goals. Jarvis, 66 points, 32 goals. Jackson Blake, 53 points. That's his number. 22 goals. Gostisbehere, 50 points, 13 goals. Taylor Hall, 48 points, 18 goals. And Logan Stankoven, 44 points, 21 goals. Keandre Miller, 37 points, 8 goals. And Jordan Staal, 36 points, 20 goals. That's the top 10 for points this season. What a run in the regular season as well. And a number of subs, man. I mean, Bradley Nadeau, Mike Riley, Charles Alexis Legault, Nick Delorier, Felix Unger-Sorum, Justin Robidas, Dominic Fensor, Ronan Seeley, Josiah Slavin, Skylar Brendamore, Caden Premu. It was a myriad of players to get through the regular season this year, but it all paid dividends here at the late. Canes, I haven't mentioned it, but one of the fortunate things this playoff run, Carolina manages to stay healthy the entire time. And that ultimately, I think, also was a big, advantage that got them past Vegas, because Vegas definitely started showing the gas running out in the tank, specifically in Game 5. And then obviously Carlson being out of the lineup there for Game 6 didn't do him any favors. So good. It was tough to watch during the regular season. I think it had a lot of people very uneasy. But it was massive. Like I was saying during the regular season, it's going to, and it did pay dividends this postseason and in the finals specifically. It got them past that hump. And actually, I mentioned it on the last cast as well before I pause this video and make another segment here. Similar, like I was mentioning, the fact that Carolina had to get past the Eastern Conference Finals and then they win the Cup, similar to Washington getting past the barrier of the Pittsburgh Penguins and finally winning a Stanley Cup. I think it's very fitting that both of those franchises getting past their gripes in the East, their barriers, their obstacle in the East, finally getting past it and winning in the finals, they both do it in Vegas. Not just against Vegas, but in Vegas, the two of them. Really funny, really coincidental. Shout out to both the Carolina Hurricanes and the Washington Capitals for doing that. Anyways, back to Svechnikov. He had a great season this year. He stayed healthy all year long, if I'm recalling correctly. I think he missed. Let me just double check. Yeah, he only missed 3 games, so huge for him. He played all 19 games of the postseason. I mean, there's a storyline right there. Svechnikov has had his health issues. His ability to stay healthy and on the active roster in Carolina has plagued him. He had an unbelievable, not an unbelievable, but he had he had an awesome personal point total and goal total for the regular season there. Again, 70 points, almost a point per game, and 31 goals. That was huge for him. I also believe that is a career high for Andrei Svechnikov. Let me just double check. Career. Yes. 31 was his career high this season. His next closest was 2022. Well, 2021, 2022. He scored 30 goals that season, and everything else has been 24 or less. And again, a guy that has faced his fair share of, struggles with staying healthy, with staying available. So big, win for him as well. So happy for Andrei Svechnikov. He's similar to Sebastian Aho. He has hung around. He has been developed by Carolina. He's been a part of this team since the initial run in the Stanley Cup playoffs, when he, decided to fight Alex Ovechkin and took some hard ones there. I'm sure that was discussed in Russian to start fighting that, and maybe that enticed him. But he took a hard, heavy hit in that one early in the playoffs, and I don't think he returned that postseason. So big rewarding championship for him. He does stay healthy the whole time. Again, that first line, something to say about the first line and them struggling on the score sheet was that they all played all 19 games. And in the Stanley Cup playoffs, your top line is going to be matched. Every team you play with is going to put their top players, their top defensemen on your top line, and it's going to hinder them. And this is why McDavid has not had the team success that he has hoped to see. This is why Ovechkin took as long as he did to have the success that he wanted to see. It's because they get locked down in the postseason. And if the guys around you can't get it done while that happens, it becomes very, very, very difficult to win a series, not just 4. So those guys, while they were shut down, they did a great job of doing the same to the top line for Vegas, to the top line of Montreal and Philly and Ottawa, right? I don't think Brady Tkachuk had any goals, if I recall correctly. And I want to say he had very little to none assists, so no points almost as well. Same with Philly. I mean, Philly didn't put much together at all. Hall said it best after, he was grilling Keith Yandel on the Spit and Chicklets podcast, for picking Philly over Carolina. Like, his quote was, like, if you watch hockey, how could you pick Philadelphia? They weren't going to lose to Philadelphia, is essentially what he said. And again, just because they weren't showing up on the score sheet, Aho, Svechnikov, Jarvis, they were making an impact on the game. They were creating chances. They were making, plays. They were being physical. Svechnikov especially, I really liked the physical game that I saw from him throughout the playoffs. He wasn't making it easy for his opponents, more so than Jarvis and Aho were, I felt. And he was sticking up for teammates. That whole line was... It was a good playoff for that line, despite, again, not really living up to the expectations that I think we all, well, the hockey community at least, had for them on the score sheet there. So happy for the Sebastian Aho, Svechnikov, Jarvis line. Those guys really are the faces of this organization, especially now that we are champions with them. It's just for everyone. It's just been magical. The fans, the coach, the players. It's such a special time. It's hard to put the feeling into words when it gets down to it. Next up on the storyline discussion, Shane Gostisbehere. Man, Gostisbehere is an NCAA champion, and now he's a Stanley Cup champion as well. And he's a Union College NCAA champion. That's an arena I actually have played in youth hockey. So kind of special there and actually one of my biggest hits as I was a defenseman. Like I've said, I was very similar to Jacob Slavin. I prided myself on, not being on the ice for goals against. I only scored 4 goals in my entire youth hockey career. But one of my all-time memories was a massive hit, and I made a great, play to break up a breakaway, and then as the guy retrieved the puck, I laid one of the biggest hits of my career, and it was clean. I took a penalty, but my mom's got the footage. If you listen to it, all the fans, all the parents, they say the noise was called. You can't call the noise was the quote. Because I was called for head contact, even though the footage shows I went right through the body. And it was just, so, the connection there with Shane Gostisbehere, kind of special for me. And he was a Florida guy, funny enough, not even from New York, but huge for Gostisbehere, especially because he departed Carolina, went out and played, who was it with? Was it Detroit, maybe? Let me double check that really quick. Detroit. So he went to Detroit for the 23-24 season. Had a good season with them. Very comparable numbers to what he's been doing here. In fact, he had even more assists than he's ever had in his career. At 50 or 46. Sorry, not more. He had a year with Philly that he got 52 in 2018. But 50 or 46 was his next highest with Detroit that year. But he comes back to Carolina, round 2, and now he's a Stanley Cup champion. He had a great series. He had a good playoffs too. I was starting to get into the feeling that, this is not the size comparison, not the personality comparison here, but, and I'll explain the comparison I'm trying to make. I was starting to feel like he was Tony DeAngelo 2.0. And there was aspects of D'Angelo's game that I liked. He had that fire instinct. He had that, he liked to play the mind game. He liked to get in your face. He didn't back down kind of thing. But one aspect that I could not stand watching was the way D'Angelo worked a power play. He was regarded as, a power play defenseman, and I did not enjoy watching him quarterback a power play. I won't get into specifics just because I could go on and on about it, but I was feeling like Gostisbehere was, at least in his first stint with Carolina, I felt like he was sort of like D'Angelo-esque with the way that he ran a power play. I even felt it throughout the regular season, but I chalk it up to this regular season being different than any other before, where, we just went through all those injuries. We went through such a weird regular schedule with the long extended Olympic break in the middle of it. It was not ordinary by any means. And so I chalk it up to that, because ultimately going through the playoffs, Gostisbehere really brought it together. He made a ton of good plays at the line that just shook somebody off of him, both on even strength and on the power play, to create space, to create chaos, to create an opportunity. And obviously he also threw a lot of pucks on net that were tipped and ultimately ended up being turned into goals. So, and he had a goal of his own too. So, a much better playoff this year for Gostisbehere. Really happy for him as well. Again, Union College NCAA champion, as well as a Carolina Hurricane Stanley Cup champion. Never doesn't ever feel not good to say that. Sticking along with the defenseman here, Keandre Miller, another fantastic storyline to go over. Guy didn't have any goals. He had 9 assists this postseason, but his presence was felt out there. Of all the defensemen, he probably had the most standout performance of any of them. It's a rebirth year for him. He spoke to it a little bit. He came over in a trade, obviously, but it was one of those trades where we wanted to sign him as a free agent, but we wanted that extra year and built into his contract. So, we asked New York to sign him because the way it works when you sign a free agent, the team that is re-signing him has the ability, it's changing. At the time, it was they could sign him for 8 years. It's being changed to 7 now. That's the max length. And a team that's signing someone as a free agent previously could only sign up to 7 years, and now 6. So Carolina asks New York to sign him and then trade him to us. So we send Scott Morrow and some draft picks, or maybe some prospects, I forgot what. But a lot of people now are saying we fleeced New York. But Miller had a tough go of it up in New York. I think sort of similar to Marner and a lot of guys too. Like those are hard markets to play in. The media is all over you. The fans have all the expectations, and they're just as bad as the media sometimes, if not worse. And Miller, I think, it got him down up there. You could tell he was fighting some demons between the ears from his time in New York. And so the ability to come to Carolina, have this rebirth, have this second chance, this second opportunity. And he became a dad just a few weeks before the finals. He had his baby on the bench at the Eastern Conference Championship game. So kudos to Keandre. Just, again, big rebirth year for that player. And he had an awesome performance in the postseason. He played a lot of minutes as well. He occasionally led the team in penalty minutes. One of the things the broadcasters talked about was it's hard to beat a team when you have this defenseman playing top minutes, that defenseman playing top minutes, and it kind of rotates. It was kind of like Slavin would get it, then Walker could have the top minutes, then Chatfield, then Miller. And, in championships past, it's been like, with Chicago, Duncan Keith, with LA, Drew Doughty, they just constantly, Chara with Boston, they just constantly lead their team in ice minutes. But it wasn't really the case for Carolina. They could bounce around, and Miller was one of the guys who could get it, who it could happen to. So huge storyline there for Keandre as well. And again, similar to Ehlers, guy's in his first year with this team, his first year of his contract with this team. So excited to see what more comes from him, how many more they could get done for Keandre. Next, we'll go to Eric Robinson. Guy wins the Stanley Cup on his birthday. I mean, I wasn't sure there was going to be much of a storyline there other than he's a bottom line guy who gets to win, who gets to hoist the cup. But he also had a great performance. He was really, really dogging it toward the end there of the run of the finals. But he created a lot of opportunities, a lot of pivotal opportunities with his speed and his relentless, chasing the puck sort of mentality or play style rather. And then again, he wins the cup on his birthday and he gets, the players, I don't know if he got the players to do it, but the players sing happy birthday to him on the ice there when they're with the cup. That was very special to watch, very happy for him. He's a guy who's also been around the league for a while. Again, a bottom line guy. You're always happy to see those dudes win the cup. So kudos to Robinson, man. That was a good acquisition for Carolina. Until this postseason, it sort of felt like we weren't going to, get a whole lot of value from Robinson, I felt. But again, his speed and his relentless pursuit for the puck really contributed a lot to this team, whether it showed up on the score sheet or not. Just another player wearing down the opponent, and specifically Vegas, to kind of gas them out. It was awesome. It was one thing that was talked about heavily was the fact that all four lines, Rod could just roll four lines, and that's what really wore the opponents out. And again, specifically Vegas, you're feeling basically top caliber play no matter who's on the ice, and you ultimately end up running out of guys who can defend this top line, the second top line, the third top line, because like Rod says, there are no lines. There are no first, second, third, and fourth lines. It's just he's got four lines and he can put them out whenever he wants. And that Robinson line with Jankowski and Carrier, he started that line a number of times, particularly in Vegas. And it just goes to show the confidence that he has in those four players, or those three players rather. To be out there and compete and compete at a competitive level with whatever line they're faced up against. So, huge birthday gift there for Eric Robinson. While staying on the topic of that line, I'll go to Carrier and Jankowski. Jankowski hasn't shown up a whole lot. Neither has Carrier. Carrier didn't have any goals this postseason, and Jankowski had one, and it was from game 2 of the finals, so it took a while. He did have 2 that were taken back throughout the postseason, but the 2 of them, Jankowski was fantastic in the circle. Carrier and Jankowski both, just like Robinson, that relentless pursuit of the puck. Carrier specifically, the relentless pursuit of the forecheck, and keeping defensemen hemmed in their own defensive area or forcing the defense to make a bad play. He was out there making big hits. It was a big one. This is a big one for William Carrier. It's now his second Stanley Cup ring. It's also cool that his first one was with Vegas, and now he gets one against Vegas. So big storyline for Carrier, and then Jankowski gets to he gets to leave I want to call it the cesspool of Nashville. Nashville's kind of in a real awkward situation here. Their GM retired kind of in the middle of the project he was putting together, and Jankowski got to leave that and come to Carolina, and now he's a Stanley Cup champion, a guy who very much deserved it. That goal in game 2 was huge, and again, a foreshadow, will be part of my top 5 moments of the Stanley Cup playoffs for Carolina this year. So then, let's move on to Chatfield and Slavin. Obviously, Slavin, it goes without saying, just the number 1 defensive defenseman in the league. Guy had a rough go of it this postseason. At times, it felt like it was potentially the worst he's ever played. He admitted in an interview with the Spit and Chicklets that that game 1 against Montreal was probably his worst game of hockey in his entire career. And he had some trouble finding his game throughout that series, throughout the start of the Vegas series. but he really honed it in for Game 5 and Game 6. And the guy is now the second American-born player to win a Stanley Cup and a gold medal in the same year. And quite obviously, the last time that was done was 1980, because that was the last time the Americans won the gold medal at the Olympics. So, huge accolades for Slavin. I think, to be honest, I haven't mentioned it once yet, but this championship gives a number of people on this team, and I say people because it doesn't just pertain to the players, but this championship gives a number of the guys that are a part of this team, I think, that Hall of Fame, at least the Hall of Fame conversation. Maybe not, maybe not getting all these players accepted to the Hall of Fame, but I think you can start the conversation with a number of them, specifically Taylor Hall. I think Jordan Stahl, especially when you now add in the Conn Smythe hardware, I think he can go into the mix of Hall of Fame conversation. I think Aho is now on his way. Especially this season, I really want to see him get a 100-point season. I think if he can do that, that really elevates him into the conversation. But a Stanley Cup championship as an assistant captain, with a long tenureship of the team that you win it with, definitely qualifies for at least having the conversation. And then Slavin is the other one now. Again, the gold medal paired with the Stanley Cup in the same year. We'll see what more comes for him, but certainly, in my opinion, should be a Hall of Famer one day. He is not flashy. He doesn't have the highlight reel of scoring goals, this, that, and the other thing in terms of the point sheet, but the guy keeps pucks away from the net. I've said it. If I haven't said it in the past, I've said it in my lifetime. If there's a 3-on-1 going against my team, if Jacob Slavin is the one, I have no worries whatsoever. It's probably the most chill state I could ever be in such an odd man rush with Jacob Slavin falling back. He's that good of a hockey sense and defensive defenseman. It's fantastic to watch him, and I'm so glad that he could hoist the cup this season specifically, not just with this team. And then Chatfield, his counterpart there, Jalen Chatfield, he also had a great playoff. He was a guy. He was, I think, one of the most rock steady defensemen. Him and Nikishin, they both carried themselves with such consistently good defensive play. Jacob Slavin and Nikishin both have good speed. They both have good stick handling. They're really good. They're above average all-around defensemen, I would say. They do tend to play more on the defensive side of things, but they're not afraid to get up in the mix and try and make something happen either. And so they controlled a lot of the play, both Nikishin and Chatfield. And it's good to see Chatfield win it. He's a more veteran guy. I think he's about 30 or so. Yeah, he's 30. He turned 30 this year, so it's huge for him to win too, because once you hit that 30 mark, it's, for most guys, it starts to crest into, it might not happen for me, I would say, especially in the mental game, but not so much for Jalen Chatfield. He's a Stanley Cup champion. And again, Nikishin as well. He also deserves his credit here. He's got his storyline, having all that fiasco trying to get him out of the KHL last year, being able to make his way to Carolina for the playoffs. He didn't get to play immediately when he came over, but he had a great regular season. He didn't get to flash that that shot that booming shot that I was hoping to see this year in the postseason. But he got 11 goals this year, 33 points in 81 games played. Plus 18 on the plus minus. He was a good defenseman this season, and he got over that heavy hit. Remember, he took that giant hit in the Ottawa series in Game 4, if I'm not mistaken. Tough game to take a hit like that in, but he bounces back from that. Those 6 days off between that series and the Flyers series were huge. And that's something that I also wanted to mention. Carolina gets to beat the rest versus rust debate. especially between that second and third round. Like, dude, wasn't even a question. They were rolling. They just needed that one bad game against Montreal to really tie it all together. One bad game against Vegas, and it's off to the races after that. They have that non-ice practice in both situations, and they completely flipped the switch on both series. It was great stuff. What a special run for the team. Like, I just can't say that enough. Jordan McMartinook, just a veteran dog, to be quite frank, a very average player, in my opinion, but a guy who's been committed to this team for a long time, gone through some really down in the dump moments, being put on waivers in Carolina, not really knowing if he's going to be able to continue on with this team, but ultimately it was awesome to see Jordan Martinook. Jordan Martinook really felt like you or I kind of being able to win the Stanley Cup, in my opinion. So, big storyline there. Like, we're going through all of them, and I can't stop saying it, but just good for him. Even from me, he's faced skepticism. I have been vocal, if not on this podcast, between conversations with my wife or friends, I've kind of questioned his presence at times. To be quite honest, if you want to roll the clock all the way back, I would have rather kept Warren Foegele at the time than Jordan Martinook. I thought Foegele was a better, because he's a workhorse. Martinook is like that workhorse, digging in deep, battling in the corners, really hounding guys for pucks, and he's the type to really wind up with garbage goals kind of thing because of his play style and because of his, again, just an average player, in my opinion. And so he kind of has to earn those garbage goals if he's going to score in this league, this elite league, the NHL. And he does. He did create, I think he even scored a garbage goal in that comeback, that 4-0 comeback against Vegas in Game 3 there. I know they didn't win, but they did come back, and yeah, he did create a lot of chaos and got, was able to pot a very garbagey type goal there for himself. So he was, it's ultra special for him again, because it feels very much like a you or I kind of player who manages to win the cup there. And then the last skater before we move on to the goalies here, Sean Walker, just a super under the radar type of playoff, in my opinion. Played really solid defense. He was very similar to Chatfield. He didn't. Chatfield was on the score sheet a lot more, but I guess he's more similar to Nikishin in that sense, because he wasn't on the score sheet a whole ton, but he's very fast. He's very engaged. He's kind of like the Will Carrier of the defense. He likes to throw his body around. He really likes to make people feel his presence and wear people out in that way. And he played great. Took a good amount of penalties there. Looks like he had about 8 penalties across the postseason, but he also did his fair share of getting this team to the final stretch, and it was just really unsung because he didn't score any goals. He only had 3 assists, and we didn't really see him much because the way the game flows, he's usually in the background of the camera or off screen. But again, just makes a lot of smart plays. He was a +11. And it's because he makes a lot of smart plays. He doesn't put himself in difficult positions to have to come flying back and take a penalty or what have you to break up a scoring opportunity. So last but not least on the skaters roster, Sean Walker, Stanley Cup champion. We'll talk about the goalies and their storylines, and then we'll get into my top 5 moments of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Obviously, we'll start with Freddie Anderson. Just, I'll be the first to admit it. I've been highly critical of Anderson over the last 3-4 years. Guy plays 16 games, ends up having to walk out in Game 3 of the finals because let's face it, it was an abysmal second period for him. I know we had those 2 goals overturned in the second period, but if we didn't, and they were kind of bang bang. I mean, the goaltender interference, I think, was a little bit more on the black and white side, but goaltender interference is honestly a 50-50 every time. I'm a firm believer of that. And the offsides was by margins, by inches, if not an inch. So you very easily, I mean, and it feels like, you get scored on 6 times in that period, because you kind of do. The crowd reacts that way, and you feel it. You feel it in that sense. So that second period ends, and it's 4-0, and Anderson, I kind of speculated it in the last episode, might be done in a Carolina Hurricanes uniform. That may have been his last appearance, but even with that game, even with that poor performance, he still managed to post a 1.89 goals against average with a .910 save percentage, making 322 saves on the 354 shots that he saw in total, letting in 32 goals across the Stanley Cup playoffs. So kudos to Anderson. He's been around the league for a long time. I think he's about 37 now. He was the first player that Stahl handed the cup off to. So, kudos to Freddie there. I personally would have given it to Taylor Hall. But the Anderson picks makes a lot of sense too, because Hall's a lot newer to the Hurricanes. Anderson is the veteran guy when you take Hall out of... I mean, he is, even with Hall in the mix. Anderson is the more veteran guy who has yet to win a cup. And he did play a really, really good Stanley Cup playoffs this season. He went 13-2 with a total of 16 games played. Major kudos to Frederik Andersen there, Stanley Cup champion. And then last but not least, the storyline of not the century, but the storyline of the decade maybe. Certainly the storyline of the Stanley Cup playoffs and the Stanley Cup finals specifically. Brandon Bussi finally gets the nod there in the third period of game 3. Holds the door closed almost the entire game. Literally the entire game until the very last second on that fluky goal off the backboards. Brandon Bussi, and it's lights out in game 6. In the series clinching game, it's lights out for Brandon Bussi. He posts the shutout. What better way for him? I mean, the storyline there, I don't need to go through it. I will, but I don't need to because it's been so talked about here. But the guy goes undrafted, doesn't ever get an opportunity to play in the NHL, and he's tearing it up in the AHL out in Providence, out in Charlotte, I believe, with Florida. Never gets his call up in Boston, never gets his call up in Florida. Florida puts him on waivers, and Eric Tulsky swoops in and says, we'll take that free goalie, that budget Andre Vasilevsky, I'll call him. And he has an amazing career. He has an amazing year in his career. It's his first season in the NHL. He goes unbelievable throughout the regular season. Starts to taper off there toward the end. Has his struggles. Doesn't look quite as good as he did throughout the year, but he does manage to sign a deal to stay with Carolina for 3 or 4 years, I think. That calms him down. He gets the almost 2 full months off throughout the playoffs to rest up. And he has to come in cold in his first NHL playoff game in Game 3 of the finals. And he does amazing. 1.6 goals against average and .931 save percentage. He only lets in 6 goals in these 4 games that he plays. Including the shutout there in Game 6. So what more do you have to say about Bussi? He's a New York boy. He's an American boy. Good to see him win. And it's good news. I mean, even if Anderson is off of the roster or out of the NHL at this point, if this is the end of Frederik playing in a Carolina Hurricanes uniform, the future looks bright for the goaltending situation in Carolina between Bussi and Kochetkov. It's going to be interesting next year to see how that tandem plays out, if it remains this way. But right now, I mean, if you just look at the stat sheet, if you just look at the paperwork, Bussy looks like the head and shoulders starter next season, while Kochetkov will be the backup. We'll see. But that's it for storylines. Finally got through all of them there. That was tough. But, it's just, like I've been saying, it's a magical time. I haven't mentioned the date yet, but today's Friday. It's the afternoon and Friday here. I'm off for work today for Juneteenth. We've got the parade tomorrow. Really looking forward to that. But I wanted to get this episode going before that goes. All right, my top 5 moments of the Stanley Cup playoffs. I've been thinking about it a lot. I'm going to go with, I guess I'll work back up from 5 and go up. But I'll start out with the opening seconds of the entire playoffs here, not just Carolina's series, but the entire NHL playoffs. Obviously that fight between Brady Tkachuk and Jordan Staal, that was chilling, I guess. Not chilling in a sense, I'm scared, but chilling, like neck raising and excitement type of chilling. Really, really cool that Staal answered that bell. It was a decent fight. It was short. It was quick, but that really set the tone for the playoffs, for that series specifically, but for the playoffs as a whole. And it's really cool now that they are Stanley Cup champions to be able to look back on that moment, which feels like yesterday, but was about 2 months ago now. And it happened to be on our move-in day. We moved out of our apartment and into our home here in Raleigh. In fact, during that game, I actually missed seeing the fight live because my cat decided to hide in a really good place. I think I went through the story, maybe not, but I won't go through it now. Moment number 5 on this Stanley Cup run is the Brady Tkachuk Jordan Staal fight to open the playoffs. That's going to be an iconic clip, I feel, at least in Carolina Hurricanes lore. Maybe not so much in the NHL, but huge. My number 4 pick, the Sebastian Aho power play goal to open the scoring in Game 4 of the Eastern Conference Finals. That was a shutout game. Carolina beats Montreal 4-0 that game. Obviously, Aho's opening goal is the game winner there for that reason. But that was huge. That was a lot of the conversation had been going on for a good amount of time. I would still say it was in the early talks of where's Aho, but it was throughout that series, it was like, where's Aho? And on not just that, but also the power play. Where's the power play? And the Canes had been getting it done up until that point without the power play, without Aho. But any bit of a boost that you can get in the playoffs, particularly in a conference finals or the cup finals, is huge. And it's a great celebration from Aho. It's in Montreal, so it's quiet. It's silent after that one, and Aho has that fantastic down to one knee and just the swinging fist up with the. If you listen to the mic'd up version, he's really like, woo! It was a good one. That's one of my favorites as well. Next, number 3, the number 3 of my top 3 moments in this run. I'm going to be putting the 4-goal comeback there, and specifically the 3 goals that occurred within the same minute of gameplay. What a barrage of goals. That was the moment where I felt, after seeing that, even though they were still down by 1, I felt, okay, we're tying this up. This game is going to overtime. There's no way it doesn't happen. B, I'm thankful because we're still sitting in the arena for this at the watch party. And, I had wanted to go home and my wife wanted to stay. So I was, thankful for her wanting to stay and being able to experience that one. Funny enough, Shane Willis, Will the Thrill, called people out in the intermission after the third period there before going to overtime, called people out in the arena for having left and gave kudos to the people who stayed. So again, feeling a lot of thankfulness there toward my wife. But that moment for me was like, okay, this group is the realest deal. There was still a little bit of uneasiness, skepticism, especially being down 4-0 in game 2 in Vegas. You really would have liked to have seen them win that game, at least make it competitive, but those 3 goals there, that was like, oh, this is a championship team without a doubt. You go back to old Stanley Cups, I can't pinpoint any one series or game right now, but actually, yeah, I can. I believe it was game 6 of the 2013 Stanley Cup Finals between Boston and Chicago. I think it was either game 5 or game 6. In the final minute and 21 seconds there, Chicago, fast and furious, not just ties the game up, but they go ahead and they end up winning that game in the last minute and 21 after being down. Those clutch moments, those are the defining moments of hockey NHL championships and NHL championship caliber teams. Those teams that are never out, they're down, but they're never out. Down by 2, down by 1, down by 3. We've never seen down by 4, at least in our lifetime we haven't. But being down by 2 or 3, even 1, being down late in a game and being able to find some magic, and some very quick magic, is a defining factor of Stanley Cup champions, in my opinion. After watching hockey as intensely as I have for the last 20 to 23 years, that moment when they got those 3 goals and they brought it to within 1 with plenty of time left. I mean, there was still like 12 or 13 minutes left in the game when they brought it back to a 1-goal game. And that right there is like, if you bring it back to 1 with like less than a minute, less than 45 seconds, it's probably over. But you bring it back with 13 minutes left on the clock, it's a game again. And it didn't feel like it was going to be a game again during that game. And we've never seen a single team. That was another storyline. This is a team storyline, but the fastest 3 goals scored by a single team in the Stanley Cup Finals was those 3, and they came from Hall, Martinook, and somebody else. Stahl. How can I forget? Jordan Stahl, Taylor Hall, and Jordan Martinook combined for the 3 fastest games in a Stanley Cup, or 3 fastest goals in a Stanley Cup Finals. Again, just top 3. I think that was number 3. That's my top 3 favorite moment of the Stanley Cup Finals, or the Stanley Cup playoffs, excuse me. Moving on. And I'm still kind of kicking around who's going to go 1, who's going to go 2. But I guess I'll do... I guess I have to do number 1 for number 1. So number 2, it feels like... I'll preface this by saying, in my heart, this felt to me as my number 1 moment. But I'm going to go with the more publicized, the more well-known, the more well-remembered moment of Jordan Stahl accepting the Conn Smythe as number 1. My personal number 1 moment, but I'll rank it number 2, is... let's go 1A, 1B. Let's do that's what I'll do. It's going to be a top 5 where it's 1A, 1B, 3, 4, 5. But the Jankowski goal in game 2 there, the game-tying Jankowski goal. Another, a come-from-behind victory there in the third period. We're coming off of that Stankoven goal. He gets the scoring opened up. It was a lethargic game up until the Stankoven goal. really concerning game. If you're a Hurricanes fan, you're down 1-0, you've already lost the game at home, you now know you need to win one in Vegas. And spoiler alert, they win 2 in Vegas. But you absolutely need to win game 2. And throughout the majority of that game, it's not feeling like you're going to. And again, a situation similar to what occurred in game 3 that I just talked about. You get that spark, you get that fight, the team is down but never out. And you need some guys on the lower lines to make the magic happen sometimes. And that first of all, that play from William Carrier to stay on sides, to straddle the line, to fight off the defender, and play the puck off to his teammate coming in hot, Jankowski, that's just an unbelievable play right there in and of itself. And Nick, if you're listening, I'll call that a matter of the assist being better than or greater than, more valuable than the goal itself, even though it was a very, very big and valuable goal. And I know he's probably laughing if he's listening in his car or wherever, but I'm calling him out because he's a big fan of saying that assists don't matter and it's only goals. But anyways, nonetheless, that moment is going to live in my, head rent-free until the end of time, because that sequence was just unbelievable. And it's the game-tying goal. It absolutely blows the roof off of Lenovo. You get the nice ding, from the crossbar in the sequence there. Jankowski's quite a ways out from the goal when he makes the shot, and ringing it off the crossbar there. I mean, it's giving me chills just talking about it. So for me, that's going to be, in my personal capacity, I would rank that number 1. But I'm going to go with 1B. That's going to be my 1B memory. My 1A memory is Jordan Staal securing that Conn Smythe, and specifically the 6 goals that he put together in the first 5 games of the Stanley Cup Finals. Guy was on a mission. He hit, all of them were, especially in the finals series, but Staal especially, just completely owning the face-off dot, completely owning the space in front of the crease during power plays. That's where he got a lot of his goals from, was making those tip-ins. And, he scores 6 goals in those first 5 games. He only had 2 going into that series for the playoffs. So he ends up with 8 in total. And just setting all those records at his age, receiving that award. That's the other thing. He's the oldest, if I haven't mentioned it yet, oldest player to receive the Conn Smythe. That whole package there is going to be my 1A moment of the playoffs here. 2 more points that I want to make before I close it off here and sign off for season 1. 2 more points and then a third point separate from hockey, but 2 more points. Carolina manages to only be shut out once this year. Again, I've mentioned this so many times, but now that it's all over with completely, it is a fact. Only the St. Louis Blues in St. Louis managed to shut Carolina out 1 time this season. What an unbelievable, not many people, I haven't heard anybody say it. In fact, I only saw one account that was sort of like a bogus burner account maybe, post that the Hurricanes have not been shut out this season. And that was false. And I checked the comments and someone already corrected them. But, I knew that one off the top of my head. I didn't need to look it up and fact check that guy. But just an accolade that doesn't really go down on any score sheet or anything, or show up in any report or article probably, but a big notch in the belt there for Carolina to only be shut out once this season. I mean, that just goes to show that the offense could at any point get going throughout this playoff run, not just in the finals, not just in any one series, but a really impressive feat there for Carolina. On top of that, it's Carolina did not face an elimination game once this postseason. Very similar to the Knicks, this is one of the most dominant runs in Stanley Cup history. I think only one team in the modern era in the the 4-round format. I mean, only one other team has had less losses in a Stanley Cup run, and that was one of the Oilers teams in the 80s there. I think it was 87 or 86 maybe. But they went 16-2. And Carolina is, the second best there at 16-3. Just what a dominant run by Carolina. It gave them a lot of time off because of how good they were. It really shut the skeptics up over the last 8 years, especially with all the embarrassment in the Eastern Conference Finals. I really felt like they've been right there with their opponent in those conference finals. Aside from the Boston series years and years and years ago, the first run with Rod Brind'Amour. Aside from that one, Carolina, I have felt, has been good enough to win the Cup the majority of the years that they have had embarrassing endings or early exits. I've always felt that way. That's why I started this channel, because I wanted to begin documenting how I felt in each year and be able to look back and be able to reference and yada, yada, yada. But this season, they really put the skeptics to bed. They have been right there this entire time. It just hasn't appeared so, especially if you just look at the numbers, if you just look at the stat sheet, if you just listen to the Rod Brind'Amour quote that we didn't get swept. It's so nice that they have won it this way. I think it's very fitting that it, with all the storylines that are off in the background for players, for the team, the 20-year anniversary, this, that, and the other thing, it really keeps it really puts the critics in their place. They had one of the most dominant runs in NHL history. They never had to face an elimination game, and therefore, almost every series at all times was pretty much a no-doubter. The finals was rickety there for games 1 through 4, but they really leveled off in game 5 and 6, and showed complete ownership over Vegas in both of those games. So congratulations to the 2026 Carolina Hurricanes. Feels good to be a champion again. Looking forward to the parade tomorrow. Gonna try and get some footage out there for you as well. And I've got some footage from Game 5 I've got to go through still, but I do have some special projects I'm going to be trying to put together this off-season to push out before the next regular season. I've also got a few other projects with the channel itself to work on this off-season, but this one was a big one. This is a big, long podcast, so going to take me a little while probably to put the video together, and then I'm going to try and put a lot of shorts together and just have little slow drip throughout the off season, but it will be a bit of a break here for me. And so, with that, I do want to thank, if you've been listening, if you've even listened to just 1 or 2 episodes, if you're my wife and my number one viewer, I ultra appreciate you. I'm going to keep doing this. This is just year 1. I hopefully have got a good few decades left, if not more, on this earth. And I'm excited to do this year in and year out, no matter how good, no matter how bad we are. But, it's been a fun project for me to work on this. And I appreciate any of the support that I've gotten throughout the time. So without further ado, that has been Season 1 of the Caniac Chronicles. I'm your chronicler, Andy. Have a great summer, folks. We'll be back for some we'll be back for some free agency talk, a little speculation, and then it'll probably be the summer off until we get closer to the regular season. So take care. Have a great rest of your day, folks, and go Champions. Carolina Hurricanes. Let's go, Canes.